A Present for Laura, page 72. The bell in the front hall jangled softly. Laura felt the now familiar ache of fear return to her chest. Not again, she thought. At the first sound, Martin had slid into the secret room and was pulling at the rug. Bert said nothing, and his mouth was set in a tight, straight line. He reached for the trap door, but Laura stopped him. She gathered up the dishes from which they had been eating and handed them to Martin. If it were the searchers back at the door, there must be no evidence of lunch for 3 in her bedroom. Bert nodded his approval, then set the trap door in place and unrolled the rug before he left to answer the bell. Laura pulled her rocking chair into the middle of the room and sat on it, tense and quiet, waiting for the thud of boots on the stairs. Instead, she heard Bert call with a hint of laughter in his voice, "Come down, Laura. Here's a young fellow with a present for you." Well, who would send her a present? Joel came to her mind at once, and she ran eagerly down the stairs. A small boy, whom she didn't recognize, stood in the hallway, clutching a package wrapped in plain brown paper and tied firmly with string. As she descended the stairs, he came toward her, asking in a stiff, proper little voice, "Are you Miss Laura Eastman?" She crouched down to his size. "Why, yes, I am. And who are you?" "I'm Harvey, miss, and this is for you. The boy who sent this said to tell you he can't come to see you tonight." Harvey thrust the package into her hands and would have left if she hadn't caught his arm. Laura was dismayed at the message. She was sure the boy had memorized it. Did this mean Joel couldn't come after Martin tonight? "Well, you better step into the kitchen and have a cookie before you go away," she said. He considered this solemnly. "Yeah, all right." Bert followed them into the kitchen. "Who sent you, Harvey?" "I'm not to say." He accepted a cookie from Bert. "Thank you." Laura turned the package over in her hands. It must be from Joel. She remembered how he had brought her the kitten after their quarrel after the trapped rabbit. Was this a peace offering too? "Well, open it," said Bert. She wished she could be alone when she opened it. A present was a rare and exciting thing, especially one from Joel. It felt like a book of poems, perhaps, a novel by Charles Dickens. Bert and Harvey were watching her expectantly. She broke the string and removed the paper. It was a book. She turned it over and read the title, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Laura felt as if she had been slapped. This was no apology. It was an insult. This was that abolitionist book Joel had said she should read. You couldn't believe those abolitionists. Her aunt and uncle had talked about them. Abolitionists were so set on getting rid of slavery, they would say anything. Almost in tears, she flung the book onto the table where it landed with a thud. The little boy jumped and looked dumbfounded. Bert picked up the book. "I read this," he said. "It's good." Harvey licked some crumbs from his hand. "There's a note in a book," he informed Bert. "There." He pulled out a corner of white paper that protruded from between the pages. Bert pulled out the note and looked inquiringly at Laura. "Go ahead and read it," she said. Ordinarily, she would not have let Bert read a note that was intended for her, but she was so furious at Joel she didn't care what he had written. Bert unfolded the paper and studied it silently before handing it to his sister. "What do you make of this?" The short note had no greeting and no signature. It was only 4 lines long. "Though some may fail, those who try on and on will succeed. Sometimes folly leads to freedom, and the rabbit escapes from the trap." While Laura was reading, Harvey started through the pantry, heading for the front door. Bert strode after him and seized him by both shoulders. "Wait a minute. Who sent the book?" Harvey said, as before, "I'm not to say." It's all right to tell us. Whoever sent it would like us to know, Bert urged. No, Harvey tried to break free. I'm not to say. Let him go, Laura said. I know who sent it. Who but Joel would send her a copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin? And who else would mention a rabbit in a trap? She fished another cookie from the tin and gave it to Harvey. You're a good boy to do as you were told. You go straight on home now. Happy again, Harvey went out of the kitchen and ran down the road. At the first turning, he stopped and waved. Laura lingered on the steps, glad to let the sun shine on her head. The house was beginning to feel like a prison. Bert took the note from her fingers. What's this all about? I have no idea. But you said to let Harvey go. Well, I know who sent the note and the book. Joel Todd. Well, I guess that. Bert sat down on the top step. But Harvey might know something else, such as what this note means. Well, I doubt it. Joel must have made the little fellow promise to keep quiet. Harvey was just following orders, and I couldn't see you torturing him to make him break his word. I wasn't torturing him, Bert protested. You make me sick. Yeah, and you... Out of the tail of her eye, Laura saw a little two-wheeled carriage coming down the road from the left. In it was their neighbor, Mrs. Fitch, and it was too late to run into the house. The woman had already seen them. Bert thrust the note into his pants pocket while Laura sat as if turned to stone. To her amazement and relief, the lady did not get out of the carriage. She merely paused at the end of the path that led from the porch to the road and informed them briskly that she was on her way to town. I hear that they arrested Richard Todd not an hour ago, she called out. Laura could see she was delighted to have gossip to pass on. I am going right over to comfort his poor wife. What did Mr. Todd do? Asked Bert. Well, I hear he had one of those fugitive slaves hid in his house. Mrs. Fitch pulled her shawl more firmly about her narrow shoulders. People who take the law into their own hands are bound to get in trouble. Well, did they catch the slave? Bert asked. No, I hear he got away. She shuddered. I only hope I don't meet up with him. With this remark, she gave the reins a slap and continued west on the road to Lewiston. As soon as Mrs. Fitch was out of sight, Laura and Bert went inside and shut the door. So that's why Joel can't come tonight, Laura exclaimed. He said they have a slave hidden in his house. Imagine Mr. Todd being in jail. Mrs. Fitch was right, she thought. People who helped the slaves were just asking for trouble. Well, I don't see why Joel couldn't come anyway, mused Bert. He's not in jail. Laura was positive Joel was not coming. She reminded Bert, Harvey said very clearly, the boy who sent this said he can't come to see you tonight. You heard him. Well, I know, Bert sighed. Maybe I'd better go talk to Joel. And leave me here? What if the slave catchers come back? I'd be scared to death. She remembered too clearly Walt's rudeness. I wish Prince were still alive. Bert frowned. So do I, but you'll be safe enough. Leave Martin in the secret room and no one will find him. Well, if you go, I'm going too. Someone ought to watch the house, he protested. We can lock the doors. Bert gave in. Oh, all right. Come with me if you're so scared. While I hitch up Sally, go and tell Martin we're leaving. Laura clapped her hand to her mouth. Oh, what'll Mrs. Fitch think? She'll be at the Todds when we get there. Bert grinned. We'll tell her we've come to comfort poor Joel.